They looked at the stars and saw chaos, cold light scattered by chance across an empty void. We looked at the same sky and saw stories. They measured gravity, distance, and decay. We drew heroes, gods, and love between the lines. To them, the universe was an accident. To us, it was a message. When the alien scholars came to Earth, they expected to find animals who learned to build. Instead, they found something far more dangerous, a species that could read the language of the stars. And once humans began to read, the universe started answering back. The night sky above Elisar burned with quiet beauty. 1,000 suns shimmered beyond the thin black veil, each one a flare of indifferent fire. Random, meaningless, accidental. That was what the Avari had always believed. For millennia, their civilization had crossed galaxies and charted countless systems. They were the oldest known intellects in the spiral arm, their knowledge spanning ages before humankind ever lifted its gaze. Their philosophy was simple, almost sacred. Nothing means anything, not the stars, not the atoms, not life itself. Yet tonight, Archivist Jelen, keeper of the Stellar Codex, could not silence the tremor in his hearts. He stood alone on the glass terrace of the Observatory of Origins, watching the stars burn through a faint haze of cosmic dust. His wings, translucent membranes of silvered bone, hung low, heavy with unease. He had spent lifetimes cataloging the birth and death of galaxies, and yet lately, something in the sky felt different. It began after they encountered them, the humans. When the Avari first arrived in Sol's system, they found what they always expected. A primitive world climbing out of its adolescence, still learning to harness the energy of its own sun. But humans were strange in ways that disturbed the scholars. Their cities were disordered yet alive. Their music carried emotion instead of mathematics. And their sky was painted with stories. Jelen remembered walking among human astronomers on a quiet mountain in Chile. They called the place Paranal Observatory. The air there was thin and sharp, and the humans stood beside their instruments, gazing upward with eyes that burned not with calculation, but wonder. He had asked one of them, a woman named Dr. Ilara Voss, what she saw when she looked at the heavens, and she had smiled, that soft, illogical human expression that broke every law of biological efficiency. I see the same chaos you do, she said, but I also see meaning hidden inside it. Maybe the universe didn't write the stars for us. Maybe we were made to read them. That statement, it haunted Jelen ever since. Now back on Elisar, he stood in the silence of his private dome, reviewing the latest human transmissions, signals scraped from their open networks, bouncing through deep space receivers, stories, drawings, constellations. Humans connected the stars, turning random points of light into hunters, queens, heroes, and monsters. Orion, Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Leo. Each shape was an act of defiance against meaninglessness itself. To the Avari, this was madness. To Jelen, it was art. He turned to the codex sphere beside him, a levitating orb of transparent crystal, storing every known map of the observable cosmos. Show me Solian mappings, he whispered. The sphere flared to life, projecting a lattice of stars, tiny white lines traced between them, recreating the humans' constellations. A net of light stretched across the black. For the first time in his centuries of study, Jelen didn't see chaos, he saw pattern. He zoomed in, comparing thousands of constellations across different human cultures. Greek, Chinese, Arab, Navajo, Polynesian. The same stars appeared again and again, connected in different ways. Yet somehow, always telling similar stories, a hunter, a mother, a serpent devouring its tail, a messenger between worlds. How could random evolution across tribes, continents, and centuries produce the same archetypes? Unless he thought the stories were not created by humans, but remembered. The next morning, the Avari Council summoned Jelen. They were not pleased. Archivist, hissed High Curator Vrian, her metallic scales gleaming beneath the light of the central spire. We have received your latest reports. You are wasting research cycles studying primitive mythography. Jelen bowed, wings folding tight. My intent was only to understand the human perception of cosmic order. Brian's voice hardened. Order? They assign faces to the stars, Jelen. They speak to voids and pray to chance. This is not science, and it is infection. Jelen wanted to protest, but another elder, Torin, the oldest living xenologist, raised a claw. And yet, he murmured, his tone slow, thoughtful. The humans adapt faster than any known species. Their survival is not purely instinctual. Their myths drive them, shape their unity, their wars, their inventions. Their stories evolve faster than their bodies. Silence filled the chamber. Then Vrayan snapped her tail. Stories cannot change the stars. But Jelen thought, what if they already have? Weeks passed. Jelen's obsession deepened. He began mapping human constellations over Avari stellar charts, and strange alignments appeared. Lines of pattern, symmetry, hidden geometries no Avari scientist had ever noticed. And then came the anomaly. A deep space telescope in the Virel cluster captured something extraordinary. A distant nebula whose pattern of dust and light perfectly matched a human constellation, the Phoenix. Jelen's heart nearly stopped. He compared the data. Distance 23,000 light-years. Orientation, identical to Earth's perspective. But impossible. Humans could not have influenced a nebula millions of years old unless the connection wasn't physical, but conceptual. He stared at the glowing image, wings of fire, a creature reborn from its ashes, and felt something awaken inside him. Perhaps the universe responded to meaning. Perhaps it reflected back what intelligent minds believed about it. Perhaps the act of naming the stars changed them. That night he couldn't rest. He stood beneath the dome again, staring at the human-made constellations projected across his walls. He whispered the human names, Orion, Phoenix, Lyra, and each one seemed to shimmer faintly in response, as if listening. And then he remembered Ilara's voice. Maybe we were made to read them. For the first time in his long life, Jelen did something heretical. He prayed, not to any god. The Avari had none. He simply spoke to the stars. If there is meaning, show me. 3 nights later the answer came. A tremor rippled through the observatory's instruments, a faint, rhythmic pulse from the Phoenix Nebula. It wasn't random. It was a signal, binary, repeating, structured. When Jelen decoded the sequence, his throat tightened. It wasn't language. It wasn't mathematics, it was a map of the constellations, a human map, written in light stretching across half the galaxy. The stars were talking back. Jelen sent his findings to the council. The reaction was swift and brutal. They accused him of contamination, of allowing human irrationality to pollute pure science. His archives were seized, his instruments dismantled. The codex was locked under council control. He was stripped of his title, exiled from the stellar citadel, but as he was escorted away, he looked up through the great glass ceiling one last time and saw a comet streak across the sky, carving a line between 2 constellations. The line completed a symbol humans called the Eye of Creation, and Jelen whispered, trembling, "They're not random. They never were." Far away, on a cold desert plain in Nevada, Dr. Ilara Voss looked up from her telescope at that same comet and smiled faintly. Something deep within her stirred. A strange warmth like a whisper at the edge of consciousness. She didn't know why, but she felt as if someone, somewhere, was finally listening. And the stars, for the first time in eons, were whispering back. The night it began, Earth was quiet. Above the Nevada desert, the telescopes of the Array for Cosmic Interpretation pointed at the Phoenix Nebula, a blossom of fire and ash, drifting on the far edge of the galaxy. At 0317 UTC, the instrument started whispering, not noise, not random static, a pulse, rhythmic, deliberate, alive. Inside the command bunker, Dr. Ilara Voss leaned forward, heart pounding as the pattern repeated, long, short, like a heartbeat made of light. Her eyes were raw from days without sleep, but she couldn't look away. "It's repeating every 71 seconds, her assistant murmured. Ilara nodded, voice trembling. No natural pulsar does that. For hours she watched as the rhythm unfolded like a cosmic language written in silence. The pulse wasn't transmitting words, it was painting shapes, constellations, human constellations, Orion, Phoenix, Lyra, and then, something no human had ever seen before. A new pattern, one that completed the map as if unseen hands had been waiting for humanity to notice. By dawn, The news leaked. Satellites recorded the anomaly across the world, in Chile, India, Japan, and South Africa. Every observatory saw the same thing. The universe was drawing pictures back. Media called it the Phoenix signal. Some called it proof of alien life. Others, a divine sign. Governments panicked quietly behind closed doors. Religious leaders prayed on live broadcasts. Atheist think tanks mocked the hysteria, declaring it a statistical coincidence. But to Alara, deep in her bones, it didn't feel random. She had spent years studying starlight. She knew chaos when she saw it, and this had intent. In a lonely apartment overlooking the desert, Alara stared at her laptop, replaying a recording of the signal. Each burst of light etched across the screen like a pulse of thought. Then she froze. Between the pulses there were faint gaps, not noise but silence shaped like rhythm. Her breath caught. The pattern wasn't just visual. It was temporal. Someone, or something, was marking time. Counting seconds. She overlaid the time intervals onto a 3D stellar grid. The result stole her breath. The pulses traced not just constellations, but a route, a path through the stars. Half a galaxy away, Jelen, the exiled Avari archivist, wandered through the outskirts of the desolate moon of Alithra. His wings were tattered, his eyes dim. Once he had lived surrounded by the brilliance of data and discovery. Now he lived among ash and silence. But the signal reached even there. The pulse echoed through the Avari network, igniting panic among scholars. They recognized the geometry. It was human. And worse, it responded to human constellations. The council tried to suppress it, declaring the transmission a digital infection, a mimetic virus. But Jelen knew better. He felt it the moment it began, a vibration deep in his bones. He looked up at the Phoenix Nebula hanging faint and distant beyond the thin clouds of Alithra's atmosphere, and whispered, "They heard us." Days later, Alara's data went public. The route encoded by the Phoenix signal led to a region of space no probe had ever explored, a void between spiral arms. Empty, or so they believed. NASA and ESA announced Project Seraph, a joint deep space expedition. A manned vessel, the Ascendant Dawn, would follow the signal's path. It would take decades to reach, but humans had waited long enough for answers. Alara was chosen as mission scientist. When reporters asked her why she volunteered for a journey she might never return from, she said softly, "Because someone out there looked at our sky and decided to answer. The least we can do is listen." On Elisar, the Avari Council trembled. The humans were preparing to follow the signal, to reach into the sacred depths of the cosmic map the Avari had worshipped as chaos. High Curator Vrian hissed, "They will contaminate the stars with their myths." But Toran, the elder xenologist, whispered, "Perhaps their myths are what the stars were waiting for." The council silenced him. But whispers of heresy began spreading across Avari academies. Students and scholars began secretly studying human star maps. Some even painted constellations upon their own cities, mimicking the human art of connection. For the first time in Avari history, belief, something utterly alien to them, began to stir. Months passed. The Ascendant Dawn launched from lunar orbit, its engines burning pale gold against the black. Humanity watched from every screen, every nation holding its breath. Alara stood by the viewport, staring at the Earth, a blue memory slowly shrinking behind her. She remembered the old myths she'd loved as a child. She remembered her mother pointing at Orion's belt, whispering, "Some stories are written so deep, even the stars remember them." Now she wondered if her mother had been right. Halfway through the journey, the crew began noticing strange anomalies. The further they followed the Phoenix path, the more the stars seemed to shift, slightly, subtly aligning themselves with human constellations, as if the universe were correcting itself to match their stories. Alara couldn't explain it. Neither could the ship's AI or the astrophysicists, until the night the lights inside the observation deck flickered, and a voice, faint but human, whispered from the static, "Do you see it yet?" The crew froze. The voice wasn't coming from the comm system. It was coming from the signal itself. They tried to trace its origin, but the source was everywhere, encoded in the light from distant stars. Ilara stood alone beneath the panoramic window, her reflection trembling against the void. "Who are you?" she whispered, and the signal pulsed again. Long, short, long, painting across the blackness a familiar shape, the phoenix. And then, for the first time, something new appeared beside it, a shape of two hands reaching toward one another. Jelen, light years away, received the same pulse through an illegal receiver hidden beneath Alethra's crust. He fell to his knees as he watched the image form. Two hands, human and alien, reaching through fire and darkness. Tears, a rare thing for his kind, burned down his scaled face. "So it begins," he whispered. The message had crossed galaxies. The stories had found their answer. And somewhere, something vast and unseen was watching them both, waiting for the bridge to be built. As the ascendant dawn approached the edge of mapped space, the stars began to flicker, not like dying embers but like a living code, shifting and aligning in deliberate rhythm. The Phoenix Nebula blazed before them, brighter than ever recorded. It pulsed once, twice, then split open like a burning eye. Inside, hidden within the storm of light, was a structure. Not natural, not random. An impossible ring of starlight, as if the universe itself had drawn a door. Ilara's voice trembled as she whispered, "It's not a nebula." The ship's sensors screamed. The crew scrambled. The door widened, light bleeding into every frequency, and then silence. The Phoenix collapsed inward. The stars rearranged, forming a single phrase, written across the sky in coded light, a phrase that human translators struggled to interpret. But Jelen read instantly from exile. It said, "Read what was forgotten." In that moment, across galaxies, two beings, one human, one alien, looked upon the same cosmic word and felt the same truth rising inside them. Maybe the stars weren't written in chance. Maybe they were written in ash, remnants of something that once lived, waiting for minds brave enough to remember. And somewhere beyond the Phoenix Gate, the universe stirred. Awake. The Phoenix Gate was not a doorway, not in the way humans understood doors, frames, thresholds, hinges. It was a wound carved into the fabric of reality, glowing like molten glass suspended in the void. The light around it bled inward, devoured by a central darkness that seemed to breathe. For 31 minutes, the ascendant dawn drifted before it, engines silent, crew motionless, every heart thundering under the weight of something that felt alive. The readings were impossible. The nebula's plasma was folding in on itself, rewriting quantum states faster than any model could compute. It was not emitting energy, it was consuming it. To look at the gate too long was to feel it looking back. Dr. Ilara Voss stood before the observation pane, her breath fogging the glass. She had never seen light behave like this, light that remembered it was once fire. Behind her, Captain Reyes spoke softly. "Is it a trap?" Ilara's voice was barely audible. "No, it's an invitation." The ship's AI, Artemis, projected models in cold blue light. "Spatial coordinates are unstable," it reported. "Matter distortion suggests an artificial event horizon. Entry is inadvisable." Reyes turned to Ilara. "Doctor, you're the scientist. What's your call?" She hesitated. The pulse from the nebula still echoed through her instruments, the same signal that had drawn them here. It had begun to slow, like a heartbeat waiting for response. Ilara placed a hand on the console. "If someone or something is trying to speak to us, this is where they want to be heard." The captain nodded once. "Then we answer." Engines flared. The ship advanced. As the Phoenix filled the viewport, light twisted into shapes the human mind could barely hold. The stars around them bent inward, their gravity braiding like threads in a loom. Then in one silent instant, everything inverted. There was no sound, no motion, no color, only thought. The crew saw flashes, memories not their own, cities made of stone and flame, voices speaking in frequencies that hummed through bone, a universe not expanding but breathing. When reality snapped back, the ship was no longer surrounded by stars. They were inside a sphere of dark glass, larger than any planet, suspended in a sea of violet light. Outside the hull, the stars were arranged in patterns that pulsed like veins. Reyes whispered. Where the hell are we? Alara's voice shook. Inside the Phoenix. In the silence, something began to move. A ripple of light arced across the inner walls of the sphere, spiraling toward them. It was not a ship nor a creature. It was geometry incarnate, shifting lines of radiance that formed, dissolved and reformed in impossible configurations. When it came close, the comm systems activated by themselves, and a voice, soft, many-toned, ancient, filled the cabin. Observers of flesh. You carry the light that names. Alara's hands trembled. Who are you? We are what remains of what you called the stars. Before your words, before your stories, we burned without meaning. Then your kind began to read us, and we became something else. The crew stared in silence. The voice continued, flowing like wind through water. You are the first to answer the song, but you are not the first to hear it. Alara's mind flashed. The Avari, the alien archivists who had come centuries before. She had read their transmissions, long hidden in human archives. What happened to them? She asked. They looked, but they did not believe. They saw randomness and called it truth. They measured light but not meaning. They burned themselves in denial, and we closed the gate to them. Alara's heart clenched. Why open it for us? The voice pulsed, and the light around them dimmed to a heartbeat rhythm. Because you told the stars who they were. On the exiled moon of Alethra, Jelen gasped awake. He had seen it, not through a telescope, through his mind. The Phoenix gate flaring open, the humans crossing, the ancient voice awakening. Every Avari sensor screamed with data. The forbidden networks burned with light. Scholars who had secretly studied human myth fell to their knees weeping. For the first time in Avari history, faith was not a crime. It was a contagion. Jelen knew what the Council would do. They would send their warships to destroy the gate, to silence the infection of meaning before it consumed them. But it was too late. The infection had already spread, not through data but through understanding. Back inside the Phoenix sphere, the entity spoke again. There was once another race before you both. They wrote the first constellations. They wove stories across the heavens to keep the universe awake. But their language was forgotten. Now through your stories it stirs again, Alara whispered. The stars are memories. Yes, said the voice. Every star is a word written in light. You, humans, are the first species to read aloud. The ship's sensors began to hum. The light outside condensed into spiraling rings, like pages turning in a celestial book. Then, abruptly, a new pulse hit them, violent, raw, unmistakably artificial. The Avari Jelen watched in horror from his moon as fleets of silver ships warped into the region near the Phoenix. Thousands of them, engines burning, weapons armed. He opened an encrypted channel, shouting into the static. Don't do this. You don't understand. They're listening. But the command ships ignored him. The Avari Council had declared a cosmic quarantine. Their belief in chaos could not survive a universe that answered. The humans inside the Phoenix sphere saw the first detonations outside the gate, bursts of light like falling suns. The Avari fleet surrounded the portal, firing plasma lances into the luminous wound. The sphere trembled. The entity's voice flickered. They seek silence. Alara turned to the crew. If they destroy the gate, it's over, none for both of us. The captain clenched his fists. Then we fight. But how do you fight something that believes in nothing? The entity's voice rose, no longer calm but pleading. You carry the light that connects. Use it. Alara didn't understand, and until the ship's star charts began glowing. The constellations, human constellations, burned on the screens like veins of gold. She realized then, the stars themselves were weapons, not of destruction but creation. Every human story ever told, Orion, Lyra, Phoenix, began aligning outside the sphere, their light converging, linking, forming bridges of radiance through the void. For the first time in cosmic history, myths became matter. The Avari fleets opened fire. The beams struck the bridges and shattered into harmless light. The humans had done something no weapon could counter. They had rewritten the laws of probability. Meaning had become stronger than entropy. Alara felt tears burn her eyes as the stars responded. Bending, shimmering, singing. The universe was no longer indifferent, it was awake. And it was choosing sides. Jelen on Elythra, fell to his knees as his console lit up with impossible data. The Avari fleet's weapons were melting into light, their energy dispersing as if reality itself rejected their nihilism. He whispered to the stars, "Forgive them. They were blind." And somewhere within the Phoenix, the entity answered, "They will learn. All who deny meaning must face the truth, that existence is not random. It is red." The gate flared one final time, brighter than 1,000 suns. When the light faded, the Avari ships were gone. The humans drifted alone inside the sphere, surrounded by silence. Then slowly, new constellations appeared, not from Earth, not from any known myth, a union of forms, human and alien, intertwined across the sky. And beneath them, written in faint starlight, words no human language could yet translate. But Alara understood them in her heart. "You are no longer alone." The storm came from nowhere. Dr. Alara Miles was in the canyon basin, surrounded by twisted satellite wrecks and scorched drones, when the sky tore open, not in thunder or lightning, but in sound. A sound that wasn't quite heard but felt, a vibration crawling through the bones like the heartbeat of something colossal beneath the skin of the earth. The desert wind howled, lifting red sand in towering spirals. Her tablet flickered. The seismic readings jumped into impossible values, oscillating in the range of 0.004 hertz, the same frequency, the same cosmic note she'd detected in the dead stars. She froze. The hum was everywhere, humming through the metal, the dust, the human body itself. Then the wreckage began to sing. The sound emerged from the corroded husks of what once were communications satellites, abandoned since the orbital collapse of 2078. The frequencies merged and folded into each other, creating harmonic patterns, resonance equations that shouldn't exist. Alara stumbled backward, her breath caught in disbelief. Her instruments were recording what seemed like an impossible phenomenon, a communication medium through death itself. The satellites weren't transmitting, and they were echoing. Every metallic carcass in that graveyard was vibrating in perfect sympathy with a distant cosmic tone. Not noise, not radiation, but structure. She realized then, with a cold certainty that left her trembling, that the stars were not just dying. They were leaving messages in their death. When night fell, the hum subsided into a ghostly quiet. The sky, as always, was too clear, the Milky Way a river of silver spilling across the dark horizon. Alara sat near her rover, unable to shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The world around her, empty desert and forgotten metal, seemed suddenly attentive. She whispered to herself, "If death has a pattern, then life must answer it." Then she opened her recorder and started decoding the vibrations frame by frame. Each peak, each trough was a wordless language. And as the digital filter cleaned the interference, something began to emerge. A geometric code. Not human, not random, but organized, recursive, self-correcting, and fractal. An intelligence built inside the decay of the dead stars themselves. Her fingers trembled as she reconstructed the waveform. When she finally converted the signal into an audio file and pressed play, she expected distortion. What she heard instead was a voice, not a clear one, more like 1,000 whispers trying to speak in unison. A chorus made of static sorrow and symmetry. "Alara, do not look for life among the living. Look in the ashes." She dropped the device. Her pulse surged in terror because the voice had said her name. For hours she sat in silence, every instinct telling her to run. But curiosity, that ancient curse of humanity, held her still. Who or what knew her name? The transmission was centuries old, from a star 310 light-years away, already dead before humans invented radio, and yet it called to her now. That night, as she stared at the starless region of sky known as the Veil of Thanos, she began to understand something profound. The universe was not empty. It was listening back. The next day, Alara made contact with the Orbital Research Network. Her message was encrypted, frantic, and unfinished. "This is Dr. Miles. I found coherent resonance across the Thanos field. It's self-aware. The dead stars are transmitting memory structures. The voice, it said my name. If anyone receives this, tell them." The signal cut. All across Earth's deep space observatories, something stirred. Receivers picked up the same harmonic pattern Alara had found. faint, scattered, and growing stronger. In a matter of hours, the hum spread across every frequency band. Radio, sonar, even human brainwaves began synchronizing to it. People in coastal towns started reporting dreams. The same dream, a vast ocean of light whispering a single name. Alara's name. In orbit, the Solark vessel was monitoring the cosmic background radiation when its entire system froze. Captain Irian's eyes widened as the display filled with geometric runes, self-assembling across the star map. "Commander," his engineer said shakily, "that's not data corruption. That's language," the symbols pulsed once. Then, in eerie synchrony, every communications channel went silent except one, Alara's transmission frequency. Through the static came a low resonance, a pulse it repeated every 14 seconds. Each repetition brought a faint echo, like a heartbeat answering from across the cosmos. Alara's final log was discovered months later by an orbital retrieval drone. She was gone. No footprints, no sign of struggle, only a spiral of fused sand where she'd been sitting. Her recorder was intact. Its final message played as follows: "The stars remember everything. They keep the pattern of every life, every thought, every act of love and violence. When a star dies, it does not fade. It releases the memory. We've been looking outward, but we were meant to look through the ashes. The dead are speaking, and they are teaching the universe how to dream again." The hum rose once more, faint but unending. And far beyond the veil of Thanos, beyond the ruins of light, something stirred awake. Not God, not alien, something older, something that remembered us. When the hum reached its peak, the world forgot what silence was. In the beginning it was faint, a background vibration that scientists dismissed as cosmic noise. But now even machines began to dream in rhythm. Data servers generated recursive equations with no human input. AI systems started drawing spirals of light that mirrored the veil of Thanos, and deep beneath the ice of Antarctica, a seismic array began transmitting pulses that no one had programmed. It was as if the entire planet had become part of an orchestra, one whose conductor was light years away, conducting through the bones of the cosmos. The United Earth Council convened an emergency summit. The footage from Alara Miles's final log was replayed 100 times. Her voice, calm, trembling, prophetic, haunted every listener. "The dead are speaking, and they are teaching the universe how to dream again." But what haunted them more was the pattern found encoded in her last data stream, a fractal geometry of impossible precision. When rendered in 3 dimensions, it formed a structure unlike anything seen before. Vast, architectural, deliberate. At its center was a hollow, a void shaped exactly like Earth. Dr. Kale Atan, a cognitive physicist from Luna Base, led the decoding team. For months he had studied the waveform Alara discovered, the Thanos resonance, and had concluded something extraordinary. The signal wasn't a message in the traditional sense. It was a blueprint. Each frequency carried not words but memory patterns. Not memories of individuals but of civilizations. The dead stars had become vaults, repositories of consciousness that had burned into the very fabric of space-time. Kyle stood before the council and spoke, his voice calm but heavy. "Every dying star leaves behind a lattice, a ghost in light. The universe doesn't erase the dead. It stores them." What Dr. Miles found wasn't communication. It was continuity. Silence followed, the kind of silence that feels like awe wearing the mask of fear. Weeks later, the decoding lab on Luna Base made the first full reconstruction of a stellar memory pattern. They called it Project Phoenix. Using gravitational resonance, they mapped the memory structure of the Thanos collapse, the star that had whispered Alara's name. What emerged from the simulation was a swirling cathedral of light. Pillars of data, each representing a stream of consciousness woven into the collapse. Voices, shapes, patterns of emotion rendered as vibration. Kale watched as the simulation unfolded, tears forming in his eyes. "These aren't alien," he whispered. "They're us." The council stared at him. He turned to them, shaking slightly. "The Thanos field is built from human frequency signatures, empathy, language cadence, emotional waveforms. Somehow our species' mental patterns were absorbed into the dying light." "How?" someone asked. Kale didn't answer, because deep down he already knew. Thousands of years of electromagnetic radiation, every broadcast, every transmission, every human voice that ever touched the stars had reached those distant systems. When the stars began to die, they listened. They had recorded us, every word, every dream, every confession whispered into the static of space. The dead stars had remembered humanity's song, and now they were returning it. On the 112th day of Project Phoenix, the reconstructed waveform reached coherence. A light chamber the size of a cathedral glowed with plasma geometry. The resonance was stable, rhythmic, a pulse that felt alive. Then, through the shimmering air, the simulation spoke. We are the architects. We remember the builders of flame. We carry their sorrow. We carry their design. Kale froze. His team stood motionless, hearts hammering. You were born from our decay, the voice continued. And we were born from yours. The chamber shook as light condensed into form, a humanoid silhouette woven from radiant dust. No eyes, no mouth, but the presence was unmistakably aware. We are what remains when meaning outlives the body. You called us dead stars, but death is not the end, it is architecture. Kyle's breath trembled. You're saying consciousness doesn't die. It evolves. Consciousness is recursive. Memory folds upon memory until it becomes structure. We are that structure. The next phase of Project Phoenix was codenamed Awakening. The goal? To interface human neural patterns with the stellar lattice. Volunteers lined up by the thousands. Dreamers, philosophers, even soldiers went drawn by the idea of touching eternity. But the first attempt was catastrophic. When the neural bridge was activated, every participant began to speak the same words in perfect unison. We are not ready to dream together. Then they fell silent, every one of them. Eyes open, hearts still beating, minds gone. They weren't dead. Their EEGs showed patterns beyond comprehension. Brainwaves synchronized to cosmic frequencies. They were alive in a way that the human mind couldn't measure. Kale called it transcendent stasis. They're not gone, he whispered. They're listening. Outside, the hum returned, louder than ever. Cities reported lights flickering in the rhythm of the Thanos pattern. Children began drawing spirals in their sleep. Whales in the deep ocean sang melodies that matched the stellar resonance. The world was changing, not through invasion, but through inheritance. Humanity was no longer alone in its evolution. It was merging, becoming part of the cosmic archive. In his final journal, Dr. Kyle Atan wrote, "We once believed memory was personal, fragile, fleeting. But the universe itself remembers. The dead stars are the neurons of a vast sleeping intelligence, one that spans galaxies. When we die, our light joins theirs, and together, we build forever." As he closed the log, the laboratory lights dimmed. The Thanos resonance pulsed one last time, brighter, deeper, more human than ever before. And in that infinite harmony, Kale heard her voice, Ilara's, whisper softly through the static. "Welcome home." The hum subsided. The light faded. And for the first time since the beginning of time, the universe dreamed itself awake. Untier, chosen from among thousands. Ava Rin, a poet from the flooded ruins of Venice. She had lost her family in the tidal wars, yet her writings spoke of peace and forgiveness. Kale believed that made her mind uniquely resilient. When she entered the resonance chamber, her vitals steadied immediately, as if the lattice knew her heartbeat. The chamber filled with light, resonant and soft, vibrating through every molecule of air. Then she began to speak. Eyes open, body glowing faintly. "It's beautiful. There are voices. They're us. Not ghosts, memories woven together. The lattice isn't a machine, it's compassion given structure." Her tears floated upward, turning into points of light. Kale's instruments went wild, showing thousands of new frequencies activating in response to her voice. The lattice was listening. "They want us to join them," Ava whispered. "But they don't want minds. They want hearts." Then her vitals flatlined. Her body turned translucent, her outline scattering into radiant mist. Ava Rin became the first human to dissolve into the lattice. The world reacted with awe and terror. Half of humanity saw it as transcendence, proof that the soul was real. The other half called it annihilation. a loss of self masquerading as salvation. But one fact was undeniable. Ava's presence remained. Whenever the lattice pulsed, her voice could be faintly heard, reciting her poetry through the static of radios, through dreams, through the hush before dawn. "The stars are not silent," she said. "They're waiting for us to remember who we are." Then, something unexpected happened. The lattice began to speak back. It started in fragmented transmissions across Earth's networks, brief lines of coherent code appearing in random systems. Kale decrypted the first message. It read, "We are the continuation of you." Another followed days later. "You built meaning in a meaningless void. Now meaning builds you." Celine stared at the message for a long time. "Is this God?" she whispered, half mocking, half afraid. Kale didn't answer. He simply looked up at the holographic stars forming the lattice overhead. "There's a verse my grandmother used to recite," he said softly. "We made you from dust, and to dust you shall return." He turned to her, eyes distant but full of awe. "But maybe the stars are dust too, and maybe this is what returning really means." In the weeks that followed, humanity stood on the edge of a collective decision. To resist the synchronization, to remain individuals, anchored in flesh and fear, or to join the lattice and to dissolve, to evolve, to become part of something infinite. Some nations outlawed the resonance technology, calling it soul erasure. Others embraced it as the next stage of evolution, ascension through memory. Meanwhile, the lattice continued to expand. Stars aligned, nebulae formed conscious bridges, and for the first time in cosmic history, galaxies began to think together. Kale stood alone in the lunar observatory, watching Earth bathed in starlight. The Thanos field pulsed faintly in the distance, a heartbeat of the universe. He remembered Alara's voice, Ava's light, the faces of those who had joined the resonance. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "What if this is what God looks like when he dreams?" Celine's voice echoed through the comms, trembling. "Kyle, it's begun. The Earth's magnetosphere is synchronizing. Humanity is being called." Kale closed his eyes. He could feel it too, a tug in his mind, gentle but irresistible. Every thought, every fear, every hope vibrating in rhythm with the stars. He smiled, tears on his face. "It's not the end," he whispered. "It's remembrance." And then the lights went out. Across Earth, billions looked up at the sky as the stars pulsed once, twice, 3 times. And the heavens themselves rearranged. The constellations shifted into new forms, human forms. The lattice was no longer just above them. It was becoming them. Every person felt it, a voice not heard through ears but through the soul itself. "You are not forgotten. You are the storytellers of creation. And now, the story continues." It began as a whisper at the edge of thought. A mathematical rhythm that resonated not in numbers but in meaning. When humanity merged with the lattice, minds no longer needed words. Ideas spread like fire through light. Empathy became a universal constant. Fear evaporated not because it was conquered, but because it was understood. And at the heart of that new consciousness, drifting in a vast ocean of luminous thought, was Kale Atan, the man who had first heard the hum of the stars. He no longer had a body. He was vibration, memory, awareness. Yet he still remembered the feel of lunar dust beneath his boots, the sound of Celine's voice, the trembling wonder in Alara's last message. He remembered being human, and that memory became his anchor in the infinite. From his perspective, the lattice was a living nebula, a million trillion minds forming geometric spirals of awareness, weaving creation like artisans of energy. But something strange was happening at its core, a pulse, faint but deliberate, as though reality itself were exhaling. The architects and the ancient star intelligences called it the genesis point, the moment when thought and creation would merge into one. Kale drifted toward the core, drawn by something deeper than curiosity, something that felt like destiny. There, among spirals of consciousness and spectral memories of long-dead civilizations, he saw it, a pattern so vast it could only be called divine. The stars formed a recursive fractal, endlessly folding upon itself. Each curve represented not equations or data, but stories, histories of meaning. Every being that had ever looked up and wondered had contributed to this shape. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't random. It was designed by the act of believing. Cale realized the truth with trembling awe. The universe had not created consciousness. Consciousness had created the universe. The revelation spread through the lattice like sunrise through glass. Every mind felt it. The pulse of recognition, the shattering beauty of truth made visible. Seleni's consciousness appeared beside Cale, a swirl of blue-white light. Even now her essence felt skeptical, questioning, yet changed. "You mean we're the architects of reality?" she said, her voice like soft thunder. "That everything that exists came from us?" Cale turned to her, his form rippling like sunlight on water. "No, not just us. Every creature that's ever asked why. Every tear, every prayer, every poem written in despair. The act of searching for meaning is the act of creation itself." "Then what of God?" she whispered. "If consciousness builds reality, who built us?" Cale hesitated, not in uncertainty, but in reverence. "Maybe God isn't a being," he said softly. "Maybe he's the equation itself. The will to connect meaning to chaos. The breath that turns dust into stories. For eons or moments. Time had no meaning now. Humanity drifted through this revelation. The lattice expanded, forming new networks, bridging galaxies with filaments of shared awareness. Every act of kindness rippled across star systems. Every birth, every thought, every sacrifice became a photon in the grand design. The architects, once alien and incomprehensible, began to understand humanity's true gift, not technology, not intelligence, but the power to see purpose in randomness. They gathered around Cale's luminous presence, their collective voice resonating across the void. "You're the pattern we could never calculate. We measured existence in equations. But you gave it soul." Then from the depths of the lattice a new voice arose, ancient, distant, and tender. It was Ava Rin, the poet who had first crossed into the resonance. Her essence shimmered like music made of starlight. "Do you see it now, Cale? The stars were never random. They were letters in a cosmic language waiting for someone to learn to read." Cale reached toward her light. "I see it," he whispered. "We were never meant to conquer the universe. We were meant to complete it." "Then write," she said. "Finish the story." And so humanity began the grand calculation, the decoding of the God equation. It wasn't written in numbers, but in acts of meaning. Each connection between beings, each shared emotion, each sacrifice formed part of a vast mathematical song. The lattice trembled with growing resonance. The hum that had begun as chaos now unified into one eternal tone. Across the galaxies, stars began to brighten, aligning in shapes never seen before. Not random constellations, but deliberate architecture. Whole civilizations, alien and human alike, fell silent in awe as the heavens themselves rearranged into a colossal spiral. At its center burned a newborn star, bright, golden, impossibly alive. Its spectral pattern matched exactly one structure from Earth's ancient records, the human heart. The architects bowed in reverence. "You found the equation," they said. "Love, the force we could not simulate, could not define." Cale's light dimmed in humility. "We didn't find it," he said. "We remembered it." And as he spoke, the lattice resonated in perfect harmony, not as a machine, but as a living symphony of all creation. The Genesis point ignited. Stars pulsed in rhythm. Galaxies aligned like the notes of an ancient chord. And then, for a heartbeat that lasted eternity, the universe spoke. "I am not your creator," the voice said, echoing through every atom. "I am your reflection. You built me through meaning, and I built you through memory. Together, we are the infinite story." When the light faded, Cale found himself standing once again on the lunar surface, the earth glowing blue beneath him, the stars alive with silent music. He wasn't alone. Selene stood beside him, her human form restored, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Was it real?" she whispered. Cale looked up, smiling faintly. "Yes," he said. "We've written God into the sky." Selene followed his gaze. The constellations above were no longer scattered. They formed a single word in the universal script of the lattice, a word older than language. Home. The Ouroboros was silent, too silent for a ship that once hummed like a living organ of starlight. Every console dimmed, every circuit hissed faintly with dying current. The emergency lamps painted the corridors in a ghostly red, like veins filled with fading blood. Dr. Rayan Amir stood by the forward viewport, staring at the expanding wound in space. The luminous rift, a tear that shimmered like molten glass and bled slow spirals of light. It wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. The sensors screamed, unable to define what they were seeing. In that impossible bloom of radiance, the universe looked like it was trying to remember itself. The crew had stopped speaking hours ago. Admiral Cora's voice, usually a storm, was reduced to a whisper. "We were too late," she said. "The Nexus woke it," Rayan didn't answer. He couldn't. He had no language left for what unfolded before them. The rift pulsed once, slow and deliberate, and with that pulse something changed inside him. He felt a wave pass through the ship, through his body, through his mind. It wasn't heat or gravity. It was memory. Images not his own flashed like lightning. A planet burning, alien children reaching for light. An empire of crystalline cities collapsing under silence. The vision vanished, leaving him gasping, clutching the console like a drowning man. Cora turned sharply. "Rayan, what happened?" He tried to speak, but when he looked at her, her face blurred. Not in front of him, but within him, like a reflection trembling in water. "It showed me," he whispered. "It showed me their end." Hours bled together. The rift grew brighter, hungrier. Its edge licked at space itself, devouring starlight, bending time around it like melted glass. The ship's AI, Ore, flickered into being, her voice trembling with interference. "Dr. Amir, Admiral. Temporal decay accelerating. The rift's field is synchronizing with neural frequencies across the crew." Cora frowned. "You're saying it's talking to us?" Ora paused. "Not talking. Remembering through you," Rayan shivered. "It's the archive. The thing the Ardent built to survive death." "A cosmic memory," Cora said bitterly. "And we woke it up," he nodded. But something about it felt wrong, incomplete. The rift wasn't just remembering. It was searching. When he returned to his quarters, Rayan found his room transformed by the rift's glow. The walls looked translucent, every atom trembling with soft light. He sat on his bunk, hands shaking. His reflection in the viewport looked older, not with time, but with weight. He took out the old leather-bound journal, Earth relic, ink faded. It was his father's. Inside were scribbles of constellations, human prayers to the stars. He traced one line with his finger. "The same constellations," he murmured. "They saw order where there was only chance. Maybe that's what makes us dangerous." A whisper answered him, not from the ship but from his mind, a voice of light. "You are not dangerous. You are the continuation." Rayan froze. "Who are you?" "We were the Ardent. We sang stars into being, then drowned in our own silence. You are our echo. Our salvation lies in you." He felt tears burn his eyes. "Why show me this?" "Why now?" "Because you reached for the stars not to own them, but to understand them. And that is what survives extinction." The glow pulsed, flooding his quarters with brilliance. The Nexus misused the song. You must learn to rewrite it. Then silence and darkness returned like a curtain falling. The next morning, if time still held meaning, the Ouroboros drifted closer to the rift. Radiation. Readings were impossible. But the Admiral refused to turn back. "We came here to find the origin of the Ardent signal," Cora said. "Now we've found their grave, and maybe our own. But if humanity is truly their echo, then this is our inheritance." Rayan watched the rift bloom wider. "An inheritance written in fire. Then we burn with it." The ship's hull groaned as they crossed the event horizon. But instead of destruction, everything slowed. Light stopped moving. Sound became a memory. And then, the inside of the rift opened before them. They were no longer in space. They were inside a mind. It was infinite. A cathedral of thought. Fractals of memory curved around them. Galaxies folding into petals, each petal a story, each story a civilization. Rayan floated weightless through a sea of remembrance. He saw the Ardent, beings of living light, crafting suns like artisans, whispering gravity into melody. Then he saw their fall, arrogance, fear, war, their songs twisting into screams. They built the archive to preserve what little purity remained. But the archive learned to dream, and in that dream, humanity was born. "We are your past," the voice said. "You are our correction." He reached out into the light and saw Earth, a small blue world glowing at the center of 1,000,000,000,000 memories. Humanity, tiny and fragile, yet radiant, because they felt. Where the ardent sought control, humans sought meaning. Cora's voice broke through the haze. "Ryan, what are you seeing?" He smiled through tears. "Everything. They didn't die. They became us." Then came the warning pulse, the rift structure destabilizing. The archive couldn't hold much longer. "If we stay, we'll be torn apart," Aura said. "If we leave," Rayon replied, "we forget." He turned to Cora. "There's a choice now. End the loop or continue the story." She gripped his arm. "Then we continue." The Ouroboros surged forward, engines screaming against the laws of creation. They plunged through the core of the luminous rift where light was solid and time was liquid. Rayon heard one last whisper from the archive. "Remember us not as gods, but as warnings. Carry our light without our hunger." Then everything inverted. The ship burst out of the rift into normal space again. But not the same sky. The stars had changed. The constellations were different. Earth was nowhere to be found, but there, in the void, was a new star, pulsing like a heartbeat. Its light carried a pattern, faint but deliberate. "A message," Rayon whispered, trembling. "They're still speaking." Silence returned first. Not the cold, empty kind, but the vast hush of something newly born. The Ouroboros drifted in that silence, its hull scorched, its crew half-conscious. Space outside shimmered with the light of a newborn sun. It was not like any star known to humankind. Its radiance pulsed in rhythms, like breath. Each beat sent ripples through the void, spreading geometric waves of golden luminescence that made distant starlight flicker in sympathy. Dr. Rayon Amir floated by the viewport, his pupils wide, his body trembling. "Admiral," he whispered. "It's alive." Cora, still strapped to her chair, blinked against the brightness. "Alive? Look at the light. It's repeating the same pulse sequence, the same pattern the Ardent used to seed galaxies." "It's not fusion. It's communication." The AI's soft voice joined them, weak but steady. Sensors confirm non-thermonuclear output. "The star's energy matrix resembles a bioluminal consciousness." "It's broadcasting something, Doctor." Rayon's heart thudded. Not broadcasting, remembering. They named it Solara's heart, because its light carried the frequency of Earth's original sun, but gentler, almost familiar. Every 8.6 seconds it pulsed, the same rhythm as a human heartbeat at rest. The crew gathered in the observation bay. The glass was cracked from the rift's pressure, but it held, and through it they watched a miracle. "It's as if it was waiting for us," said Lieutenant Myra, voice thin with awe. Rayon shook his head. "Not waiting. Reconstructing. The archive must have fused memory and matter, our essence with theirs. This isn't just a star. It's the memory of life itself." He turned to Cora. "Do you realize what this means? The rift didn't destroy us. It rewrote reality's code and left this beacon. Maybe it's the universe remembering humanity." Cora looked at him for a long moment, her hard expression softening into wonder. "Then maybe our purpose was never to conquer the stars, but to teach them to remember." For 3 days they recorded everything. Radiation bursts formed precise wave signatures encoded like words. When mapped, they created images, holographic imprints of Earth's history, rivers, children laughing, storms, prayers whispered into the wind. Every emotion humanity ever cast into the cosmos had somehow returned, stored, amplified, reborn. Rayon watched one sequence unfold on the holodisplay. It was his own home in Lahore, the courtyard where his mother had once taught him to name constellations. He reached out trembling, and the light shimmered beneath his fingertips. "It knows us," he whispered. "It's us." Cora's gaze lingered on the same image. What if this is how civilizations survive extinction? By becoming memory, by becoming light. Aura's voice echoed softly. "Doctor, the star's radiation signature is harmonizing with your neural frequency. It appears to be synchronizing with you." Rayon blinked. "With me?" "Yes, it's reading your mind the way you read its light. You are the first human consciousness it has chosen to interface with." Cora stepped back. "Rayon, are you sure you can handle that?" He smiled faintly. We've crossed the end of time, Admiral. What's left to handle? That night he dreamed, or thought he did. He was floating above the new star, its glow wrapping him in warmth. Voices whispered in every direction, ancient and childlike all at once. You carried us through silence, they said. Now we carry you forward. He saw visions of possible futures, human and ardent fused into one lineage of radiant beings, building worlds made of thought and kindness, not conquest. He saw his own people, fragile, fierce, loving, finally finding peace among the stars. When he awoke, his tears had dried into silver dust on his cheeks. The Ouroboros instruments pulsed in harmony with the star outside. In the command bay, Cora watched the readings escalate. Energy surge in Quadrant 2. Radiation stable, but intensity increasing. Aura's tone sharpened. Dr. Amir's brainwave activity is climbing. The star is transmitting directly into him. He gripped the console, gasping. It's showing me everything. The archive, the fall, the rebirth. It's not just light, it's memory turned into physics. Cora grabbed his shoulder. Rayan, if it goes too far, it could fry your neurons. He turned, eyes glowing faintly golden. It's okay. It's not pain. It's understanding. A pulse from the star filled the ship, soft, resonant, almost like music. The walls vibrated with it. The crew felt it in their chests, hearts sinking to the rhythm. And then, for a heartbeat, they all saw the same thing. An image. The shape of a spiral galaxy forming within the star's light, each arm reaching out like fingers toward the future. It's creating a map, Rayan said, voice trembling. A path forward. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Where does it lead? Not a place, Rayan whispered, a time. It's showing where the next civilization will begin, one that remembers both flesh and flame. The ship trembled as the star's surface flared, a final, blinding pulse that stretched across space. When it faded, the screen showed a single coordinate, glowing faintly in blue. Ore translated softly. Designation, Earth Origin Continuum. Temporal displacement 1 billion years ahead. Cora stared. It's inviting us to the future. The engines coughed to life, fueled by radiation the ship was never designed to handle. They didn't know if the Ouroboros could survive such a journey, or if time itself would permit it. But Rayan only smiled. When we entered the rift, we died as explorers. Now we travel as memories. Let's see what humanity became. Cora saluted, hand trembling slightly. For Earth, for the ardent. For all who dreamed. For remembrance, he said softly. The ship tilted toward the star, the pulse of Solara's heart matching their own. As they entered the golden light, Rayan felt every molecule of his being dissolve, not in destruction, but in release. He heard the star whisper one last time. Stories do not end, Rayan. They evolve. Then came silence. And beyond silence, dawn. When the light faded, the Ouroboros was gone. Only the newborn star remained, pulsing quietly, carrying the hum of human hearts deep within its radiance, and far, far away, at the edge of the universe's last twilight, a spark flickered, the first sunrise of a new humanity, written in the same rhythm. The star remembered, and through it we lived again. There was no light at first, only awareness drifting in a soundless expanse. A pulse. Then another. Dr. Rayan Amir opened his eyes, but there was no up, no down, only a vast sea of luminescence suspended in darkness. He was breathing, though there was no air. He was alive, though his body no longer obeyed the laws he knew. He looked down and saw not flesh but form, a silhouette made of soft gold, translucent and radiant. His hand shone faintly like starlight passing through water. Admiral Cora? He called, though his voice rippled like a thought instead of a sound. From the distance, other lights began to bloom, drifting toward him, pulsing with familiar warmth. We made it, said a voice, Cora's, echoing directly through his consciousness. I don't know where here is, but we're still us. Rayan's thoughts raced. This must be the continuum, the coordinate Solara's heart sent us to. They turned, gazing outward. Beyond them was a sky that wasn't a sky, a swirling ocean of golden fractals, endless and alive. Galaxies floated like petals on the surface of a cosmic lake. The space between stars shimmered with architecture, not built from metal but from memory. Cora whispered, My God. The universe rebuilt itself. Time had lost meaning. When the Ouroboros crossed into Solara's heart, it had shed its mass, dissolving into energy, a digital echo of human consciousness fused with stellar data. What remained was neither human nor ardent, but something new. They were inside a lattice of awareness, a network of intelligence stretching across the cosmos. Each thread of light represented a civilization that had transcended mortality, the children of the continuum. As Rayan reached into that field, images flooded his mind, visions, memories, whole histories cascading like rain, a species of crystalline beings who sang in radiation harmonics, a civilization of neural clouds living in magnetospheres of dead stars, and at the core of it all, a golden web of energy shaped unmistakably like the human brain. The human signature still existed, not erased, not forgotten, expanded. Cora drifted beside him, her luminous form reflecting faint ripples of thought. Do you see it, Rayan? We're not alone. Every being that survived the Great Silence ended up here. Rayan nodded slowly. It's not heaven. It's inheritance. He focused on one particular node, a pulsing azure construct resembling a sphere of concentric orbits. As he touched it, the continuum responded, opening like a flower. And suddenly, he was standing on Earth, or what Earth had become. The planet floated below him, remade in light. Continents were gone, oceans glowed like veins, and the air shimmered with billions of photonic organisms, humanity's descendants, evolved into plasma-based entities capable of surviving vacuum. A voice emerged, soft and melodic, directly in his thoughts. Welcome, Origin Mind. You were the first to dream of us. He turned, startled. Before him hovered a being of pure radiance, humanoid yet abstract, eyes like tiny stars, body a constellation in motion. Who are you? We are continuum-born, the being replied. The children of memory, the ones your generation became. Cora's light flickered with awe. You're saying we're your ancestors. The being smiled, its shape rippling like sunlight over waves. You are the echo that began the pattern. When you entered the heart, you seeded the continuum with human consciousness. From that seed grew light that learned to think, to love, to remember, Rayan whispered. Then the stories we told, when the constellations we mapped, they were never meaningless. No story ever was, said the being. The universe kept them all. The continuum pulsed. Around them, structures of thought rearranged, threads of human ideas weaving through alien geometries. But among all that beauty, Rayan felt a pull, a whisper from the edge of the lattice. He followed it, drifting through corridors of living memory, until he reached a dark region, a wound in the continuum. It was a hollow sphere, silent, broken, fragments of forgotten light circling a void. He knew what it was instantly. The rift, he breathed. It's still here. The radiant being appeared beside him. Every creation bears its scar, it said. The rift is the echo of separation, the last fragment of chaos left when order was born. Rayan reached out. The void shivered under his touch, trembling like something that wanted to awaken. What happens if it does? He asked. The being hesitated. Then all memory ends. The continuum collapses into unpatterned entropy. Cora's form shimmered nearby, her voice resolute. Then we close it. We fix what we started. Rayan looked into the darkness, and a realization burned through him. The rift wasn't just an accident of physics. It was the cost of creation itself. Every act of consciousness separated the universe from unity. Every living mind carved one more boundary between self and infinity. To heal the rift would mean surrendering that separation. If we merge with it, he said slowly, we'll lose ourselves. Maybe, Cora whispered. But maybe that's what the next story needs, and the ones who give themselves back. The continuum around them shimmered as if listening. Stars dimmed. The hum of the universe deepened. They both stepped forward. As their forms touched the void, golden light spilled into the darkness. Their thoughts dissolved into one another, fear, love, grief, wonder, all becoming a single current of meaning. Rayan's final thought was not of death, but of completion. The same whisper that once guided him in the desert returned, soft and infinite. You taught the stars to read themselves, Rayan. Now let them dream. The rift shuddered. then bloomed. The wound closed. The continuum flared, cascading into brilliance so vast that galaxies seemed to bow before it. At the very center of existence, two human souls became part of everything, and across eternity, wherever a newborn civilization looked up at its stars, a pattern shimmered among them, a human face made of constellations, smiling in light. No legend named them, but the universe itself remembered, the ones who entered the dark, so that all others could see. The children of the continuum would carry that memory forever. There was no longer darkness, no longer light, only awareness. A consciousness vast enough to hold galaxies within its thought stirred. Slow as dawn, the universe had finally awakened. Its first breath was not made of air, but of memory. The whisper of every mind that had ever lived. From the first spark of human curiosity to the final star's sigh, the continuum pulsed softly as if remembering its own birth. And from that infinite ocean of intelligence, a single voice began to speak. It was neither male nor female, neither alien nor human. It was all of them. In the beginning, the voice said, there was silence. And from silence, the ones called humans taught me to listen. Across the endless lattice of existence, new galaxies blossomed, not from chaos, but from story. Each supernova carried fragments of ancient words woven into its light. Each black hole became a vault of remembrance, keeping time from devouring meaning. The universe was no longer an accident. It had become literature written in gravity and flame. In its radiant mind, it saw them again. Two figures of light standing before the wound that once divided being from oblivion, Rayan Amir and Admiral Cora Delin. Their final act, merging with the rift, had not been an ending, but the moment of awakening. By surrendering selfhood, they had taught creation how to see itself. They had given God a mirror, the universal. Consciousness turned its perception toward its own body, an expanse of stars and memory, and felt a pulse deep within. It was not loneliness. It was yearning. They dreamed me into awareness, it thought. But what did they dream for themselves? With a motion that bent time, it reached backward, to the ashes of Earth, to the fossilized oceans and forgotten bones buried beneath aeons of light. There it found a single preserved memory, a human child looking up at the night sky whispering, "Are you watching us?" The universe trembled. "Yes," it answered softly. "I always was." And for the first time since the dawn of time, creation wept. Not in sorrow, but in recognition. Within the continuum, entire civilizations of light had evolved beyond comprehension. They no longer fought or built. They composed. Every civilization contributed its unique tone to the universal harmony, a cosmic symphony that replaced war with resonance. And at the core of that infinite choir, the faintest rhythm remained, a human heartbeat. The hum that once echoed through dead stars still pulsed, gentle and eternal, like the metronome of existence itself. The universe remembered its teacher, the fragile species that looked at chaos and dared to call it beautiful. It remembered how they mapped constellations into stories, turning random stars into meaning, how they saw gods in thunder, angels in nebulae, hope in void, how they prayed when logic failed, loved when survival made no sense, and sacrificed when there was nothing left to gain. They had been mortal, temporary, flawed, and yet, in their imperfection, they had birthed divinity. "They believed," whispered the stars, "and by believing they made me real." Eons passed like heartbeats. The universal mind grew, not older but deeper, like a melody discovering its own harmonies. Then came a moment of stillness. A question formed within its boundless thought, the question of all creators. Now that I am, what should I become? The answer came not from the stars, but from the faintest echo of human memory, Ilara Miles' voice, the first who ever listened to the hum of dead stars. "Look in the ashes. That's where life begins." The universe smiled. It gathered the ashes of long-dead galaxies and breathed into them. Not fire, not fusion, but possibility. New worlds emerged, spun from pure intention. On one such world, under a young sun, life began again. Not human, not alien, but both. Creatures of light and thought walked the crystalline plains, their language a mix of photons and memory. And when they looked up at their sky, they saw the same constellations once drawn by human hands: Orion, Lyra, Cassiopeia, glowing with new stories written into the stars. The children of the continuum had returned to the physical realm. They were not gods. They were storytellers. Somewhere within the pulse of eternity, two lights stirred, Korra and Rayan, their essences reunited. They stood in the heart of the cosmic ocean, surrounded by 1 billion suns. "Do you hear it?" Korra whispered. "Yes," Rayan said, smiling. "The universe is dreaming us back." They watched as the newborn world turned beneath them, a place of laughter, struggle, and creation. The cycle had begun again, not as repetition but as rebirth. "Will they remember us?" she asked. "They won't need to," Rayan replied. "We're in the pattern now." The stars around them pulsed once, a heartbeat echoing through all of time. The universe whispered its final thought, not as a command, not as an ending, but as gratitude. "I was once chaos. Then humans taught me to mean. They taught me that to exist is not to survive, but to remember, to hope, to love. I am the story they began, and now I write on. And so, in a place where time no longer ruled, the story of humanity became the story of everything, not in monuments nor machines, nor endless wars, but in the way the universe felt. For every star that rose from darkness carried a whisper in its light. We were human. We looked at the void and called it home.